Okay, we'll call the Assembly Finance Committee meeting of June 1st to order. Ms. Spiegel, will you please note our roll?
Thank you, Chair Tran. We have all Assembly members present in chambers besides Assembly Member Wachal Gadak, who is present via Zoom, and Assembly Member Smith is not present.
Oh, yes, there she is. Approval of minutes. Any additions or corrections to the minutes from the May 18th meeting? Seeing none, those are approved. We'll jump right into our first agenda topic, which is the Juno Economic Plan update. And we have Ms. Bell to present tonight. And if you could just turn your microphone on. There we go. And we'll take questions as we go. So if you have questions, just wave at me and get my attention. And whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Am I close enough to the microphone? A little closer. Okay. Well, I'm Susan Bell, principal or president of McKinley Research Group, formerly McDowell Group, and I'm pleased to be here tonight. Look forward to your questions. And I recognize that what we cover tonight will just be a fraction of what's in the full report, and I welcome other questions if they come up afterwards. If we can go to the next slide, just briefly, as I said, our firm, formerly McDowell Group, this is an exciting milestone for us with a 50-year anniversary. I want to give credit to the team that led by Jim Calvin, who produced this report and spent in the 2014 and 15 time period, extensive public involvement, a lot of work on the core Juno economic plan. So if we can go to the next slide. Just to touch on that, this slide highlights some of the extensive public involvement. Many community members were involved. Many hours of private and non-private, municipal, nonprofit leadership. There was detailed data analysis, a telephone survey of a randomly selected population so that the survey results would be representative of the population. Then the survey was opened up to the full community. We often do that. Extensive business surveys, outreach multiple times with different community groups, nonprofit organizations. And again, that document, I think, still is a rich body of information. Tonight's review is more of a progress update on some of the key initiatives. So we can go to the next slide where you'll see that out of 30 or so that were proposed and refined through the public involvement process and data, there were eight main areas with metrics and CBJ responsibilities and some other detail underneath it. And what I'm going to do tonight is touch on each of these to talk about what we see in the data, what we learned in the interviews, and just kind of paint a picture of what's happening. Of course, there were some things that were already underway, some dynamics in the economy that were accelerated by COVID, and I'll hit on some of that, some like state employment, childcare services, and other things. And I think before we dive into some of the details, I think it's helpful to have a progress report like this to just understand, I know Jim presented the COVID impacts on Juneau's economy earlier this winter, but just kind of see where these initiatives are. So again, as the chair mentioned, I welcome questions along the way. I've brought a copy of the full report if there's things that we need to dive into. So next slide, please. The first, these are no particular order. Enhanced essential infrastructure had a couple of key initiatives that were identified. And the first was improving access to West Douglas and the new growth area. And two things are highlighted in the presentation tonight. One of them is the accomplishment of that 3.5-mile Pioneer Road. It was a legislative grant that was administered by the Department of Commerce, and something that's underway right now and will be through the next year, which is the second crossing project planning and environmental linkages project. So again, work is underway on this topic. The freight service and affordability, there has been work, and we highlight in this bullet that the chamber and CBJ funded a business survey. The chamber has a working group. to address this. This remains a challenge for community. Transportation costs and freight costs remain challenging. And again, this is one of those areas where COVID impacts and other issues are making it more pronounced. Looking to see if there's, the next slide touches on building the senior economy. We've seen a shift from 2010 to 2020 to 1 in 5, 20% of the or 21% of the Juno population is 60 or older. There's been a number of initiatives, some of them led by CBJ, some of them led by nonprofits, private sector, but in this first bullet highlighting that there has been 8-bed senior assisted living facility is under construction right now. There's been initiatives, including the property tax abatement, the senior survey to really understand the needs of the senior population. So again, there's been some work. There's been work on a couple of key areas related to ensuring that this is an affordable, livable place for the senior population. Something that was definitely a profound issue before COVID was the healthcare worker shortage. And, pulling this up progress report together involved a series of to support that. And we've, paraphrased of, one of the interviewees from a social service provider just said that healthcare staffing was at a crisis level before the pandemic. We look to the next slide, attracting and building the next generation workforce, training, childcare, and an education system where, some of the components in this. Some of I had the opportunity to serve on the initiative as it related to COVID impacts. And I know I see Laura in the audience, I see Mayor Welton and others, this is the childcare issue was, another area where the community was beginning to address this even before COVID. And again, some profound impacts. You can see in that first bullet, childcare capacity was declining prior to the pandemic. In 2014, licensed capacity was just under 1,200. By 2018, capacity was 942. And in January 2022, it was 825. Some of that is workforce. Some of that is, business viability. Some of that is, limitations in capacity, a number of different factors. But again, that's one where when I think about something that has ties throughout all of these initiatives, childcare is, a very significant issue. Again, the assembly is to be credited. The child care committee was developed. The CARES funding, some of that was directed to address the immediate needs. But the cost and availability of child care just, it's underlying, an underlying issue for a lot of these initiatives. So just want to underscore the importance of that. Workforce training and education is addressed in more detail in the report and in the summary. One thing I just wanted to touch on, because I keep talking about impacts that are things that were underway in the economy that were accelerated by the pandemic. In the body of the report, one of the things that is mentioned here, and I just want to take a moment to highlight it, because I think it's something that all of us are grappling with now, because the response during the pandemic was immediate to all the work from home and business closures and other things. But as we go forward, thinking about training for managers and supervisors for a remote workforce or a hybrid workforce, I think is really critical. And again, it's called out in the report. We didn't put it in the slide, but as I just thought about, I was preparing for this conversation, I think about my own experience as an employer and employee. That's something that I think we're going to have to continue to, we responded immediately and we're navigating our way, but training and best practices and thinking about how we go forward effectively is important.
Ms. Gladchevsky.
Thank you. Ms. Bell, you mentioned a few times the report. Are you talking about the original report or did you do something new?
There is a report that it's in the packet in addition to the PowerPoint presentation. It's about a 50-page,
Right. So the new, you're not talking about the old one. You're
not
talking about
the 2000.
Okay. I just wanted
Thank
to
you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next slide, enhancing Juno's role as a research center. JEDC led the Forest Service sponsored cluster working group for research and development. In 2016, they were recognized and accepted a Community of Excellence in Research Recognition. We think about the entities that really can help create momentum here. We have several. This is a strength of this community. Think about NOAA, the Forest Service, and the university, and their connections into applied problems with the private sector. So this is, I think, in comparison to the few slides we just touched on, this is a strength. There's been momentum. When I think about the university, they recently led the Mariculture Conference in April. There's also NOAA initiatives around mariculture. We've got Southeast Conference, who led a statewide initiative on the Build Back Better grant application with over 50 million at stake in that. And of course, Spruce Root and other partners have another initiative there. But as it relates to, new opportunities, research opportunities, and economic development opportunities, the university that Mariculture Conference helped bring attention and people together. There is later this year, it'll be held in Fairbanks, but certainly has profound impacts for Southeast. The Rare Earth Element Conference at the university is sponsoring. And I also know that there's momentum on the Masters in Marine Fisheries, the policy program. So again, a direct connection to our industries and some of our strengths here. And again, I'm just a little more familiar with some of the initiatives at the university level, but NOAA and others certainly are key players in this.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question about this piece, and I am excited that this is an area of momentum and a strength of the community. But the side with no available data on total research funding or jobs, I recognize that we might not have a confident, comprehensive picture. But while you were looking at this area and in the work that the cluster group has done it with JEDC, do you have like a minimum? Is that not something that the university would share, or no, or some of those things are public, like we have this many research dollars in the community, or it feels like that would be beneficial to know?
Through the chair, I agree with you. Again, this progress report was a much more scaled down effort than the Juno economic plan. And I think that it might be something that through the partners, through JEDC and others, that a little more detail could be added to that. I think some information is findable. I don't have it. We didn't find it through the work that we did to pull this report together, though.
Okay, so some of that data might be public. It's just not, it wasn't part of the scope of what you did with this. Okay, thank you.
The next slide is a broader heading, building on our strengths, but 3 areas were definitely identified in terms of independent travels, our seafood industry, and Juno's role as an arts and culture hub in terms of initiatives. And, again, there was momentum. We saw growth in independent travel. The last specific work that was done for Travel Juno measured independent visitors in 2016 at about 78,000. When we look at some of the indicators, bed tax or air employments, we were seeing growth through 2019. And again, COVID impacts, we saw some pretty stark drop in travel. But again, some of the independent travelers, including sport fishing, were some of the first to begin to resume travel. We don't have new data at this point, but again, some of those indicators are strong for this season. It is an area where just to, to sort of wading away from the report, our labor shortages are suppressing the recovery that could otherwise be there in this particular sector. Laura, no, whose daughter is running the shop right now. Seafood industry is a little bit mixed. Participation by Juno residents in commercial fishing is down 11% between 2015 and 2019. The value of fish landed in Juno has been steady. So again, two different ways of looking at sort of Juno's role in this, but again, that the diversity of our economy in the seafood sector is something that, is recognized as a strength and something that people value and want to be purposeful about making sure it remains part of the community and the economy. And then we touch on the Native organizations and community and their role in growth later again in the report, but certainly Juno's economy is being shaped by the work that Sea Alaska Heritage Institute is doing to anchor the Northwest Coast art and culture here in our community. In 2015, we saw the opening of the Walter Soboleff building. Of course, next week with the return of Celebration, we'll see the dedication of the new Arts Plaza, and also return of Celebration after 4 years. So again, this is something that, there's not only these construction projects that I mentioned and the on that front as well. Moving to the next slide, thinking about Juneau's role as a capital city. There's been a lot of work in different aspects of the community. When you think about what CBJ has done, what the Alaska Committee is doing, the Juneau Community Foundation, investment in the Capitol complex. From a pure data standpoint, I know this is not new information, but the state employment is down from a decade ago by 18%. State employment is down statewide by 13%. So it's been a little more profound here in Juneau. Cumulatively, it's about $35 million in wages that have not been in the economy over that decade. So again, statewide employment is down, state employment is down, but Juneau is a little, it's a little more profound in this community.
Mayor Weldon.
Just quickly, and I know it's in your big report, but I forgot to look it up before you were talking. How are we compared to the state, though? I mean, we're talking about jobs, capital creep, but is the rest of the state jobs are down also, I believe. Are we at a higher percentage, about the same?
Statewide, state employment is down 13%. And I'm looking to see if I have an actual number, but it's, the pace here in Juneau's slightly, in Anchorage, 40%, see if I can articulate this correctly. 40% of Anchorage's employment, or Anchorage had 40.8% of state employment in 2011 and has 42%. So again, there's that, watching positions and some movement. And again, probably, opportunities for people to work from home may have begun to factor into that 2020 number because again, there was such an abrupt change. The data that we have for this just goes through 2020. So a number to watch. The next slide is revitalizing downtown. And again, this is an area where there's been a number of initiatives, some of them underway, some of them completed, some of them very visible. And I think, again, these are interrelated initiatives that we're talking about, a livable, affordable community, workforce, retention, but revitalizing downtown, I think has, again, a number of things, some sponsored by City and Borough of Juneau, Blueprint Downtown, helping guide our downtown, looking for residential opportunities. Certainly there's been initiatives on that. Incentives that have been implemented, including the downtown tax abatement, and then private sector and nonprofit investment. Again, thinking about the time horizon with JEP having been completed in 2015, is certainly been a concerted effort on this front. A few things that didn't make the slides here, but again, just, thinking of the breadth of work, the wayfinding, the story map project, there's been some other work in this area. So again, I think that, it's our front door. We're the capital city. It just has the work on this touches so many aspects of the rest of the initiatives. And again, there's been a lot of work here. The next slide, and I think there are two on this, and I'm beginning to wrap up the presentation. Housing has been, affordable housing and availability of housing. Again, it underscores, it's a core issue, is a foundational issue for the economy. It's a barrier to growth. There's been a lot of tools and a lot of work on this for, the housing action plan, the chief housing officer, work by CBJ to increase land access, grant programs. There's been, again, a lot of work, planning and zoning changes. When we move to the next slide, there's mixed signals here. We've seen rental costs decline between 2015 and 2019. The average home sale value has gone up. We've seen assessments go up. We've seen new housing units added. So again, it's a mixed picture when we think about, again, affordable and available housing. I touched on some of the senior housing issues, in a prior slide. So again, I think continued work is needed. Work has been done. I think it's been, there's been a kind of collective action, collective impact focus on this, but it remains one of those big rocks.
Ms. Wall, and then Mayor Weldon, and then Ms. Hale, and then Ms. Huskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To quote the notes I wrote here last night on the rental costs, I wrote, what? ? Rental costs decreasing. And I looked at the numbers, and it looks like it continued in 2021 as kind of counter to anecdotally everything I've heard about rental prices. And Juno, do you have any kind of explanation for what in the data, would be causing that trend, or is that real?
And through the chair, I think, Assemblymember Wald, some of this is where there's data available. The data in this bullet went through 2019. And so, again, what people are experiencing now or in the last couple of years may not show up in the data. So I think Jim and team were pulling things together. It was like to get the most current data and augment with interviews.
Yeah, I actually went to the report for this one, and it did look like there was actually data for 2020 and 2021 on rental costs, and it showed similarly flat rental costs or decreasing rental costs also in those 2 years. And I'm just curious, do we know why?
And through the chair, I just was able to put my finger on that table just as you spoke. And I do see that we were able to get data from both Housing Finance, HFC, and Department of Labor. And 2021, the single family adjusted rent did pop up from 2019, where it was 1,672 to 1,773. So we are seeing a little bit of an increase there. So again, it's I think a bit of a mixed picture. We're seeing such big jumps in home sales and a little less movement, I think, at the rental level.
Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. And Ms. Wall, just what I've heard is really nice places are getting more expensive in rent, but the not so nice places are getting less rent is what I'm hearing out. And I don't know if that's what you're hearing too. Thank you. Ms. Bell, we have not been able to do the crystal ball, so I'll ask you your crystal ball. So it's the data that's confusing to us. We keep adding more and more housing units, but yet our population is declining. Where is the pressure coming from? That's what's confusing to us, and we're anything that you could help shed some light on that would be great.
Mayor Weldon, through the chair, I don't, if I have an insight or if I have a chance to confer with Jim further on that, we'll relay thoughts back. And again, I think you just touched on, there are differences at different price points and locations, and so aggregated, it may be masking some underlying things, but I'm happy to comment back if we have insights. And also just to add, you mentioned, a couple of things that are in the first chapter. There's a couple of global things here where, our focus is on the initiatives and a progress report, but we have seen, this is with a longer view in the last decade, our population peaked in 2015 and has declined a little bit. That was already in place before COVID, and employment in the community. Also, there was a peak, around 2015 and was beginning to dip a little bit. And, so population, employment, our gross domestic product, there's some things that are just a little bit, either they were declining even before we saw COVID or are just static. And again, I think that something like this, to not lose hope, because there's progress and there's momentum, but I think what it really does is help channel people, help identify the priorities and help coordinate across the community. So just, there's a couple slides here that are some takeaways. First, there is definitely growth. And, I'm sorry. I didn't
Sorry.
mean to skip if there were other
Yeah.
questions.
We've got a couple more people in
Okay,
line for
yeah.
questions. Ms. Hale, then Ms. Huskanies, and then Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Bell. You were just talking about channeling parts of the community, and I'm really hoping in terms of housing that we can channel those parts of the community away from being darts pointed at us, because that's often what they are. And the mayor's question was my question. We look at, know it's great. It's really important. We look at these numbers and we're doing everything we can, and we can't make progress. It's like one step forward, 6 steps back. But everything I read also tells me that this is a problem in many, many places, not just in Juneau, very much a problem on the West Coast. And so that leads me to not want to reinvent the wheel, to try to learn from others who have solved this problem. But also, people look to us to do something, and actually sometimes say that rather forcefully that we should do something. And the question that leads me is, should we do something? We have had pressure to identify how many Airbnbs there are, for example. Is that a problem? Are people having second homes? Are homes vacant half the year? So there's some kind of a question there, but I'm not exactly sure what it is.
Ms. Spiegel,
Chair Treem, I just wanted to note that Assemblymember Smith has joined us.
thank you. Can you tell us the answers, Ms. Bell?
I think through the chair, I think Assemblymember Hale just and Mayor Weldon also, they're identifying the complexity of the situation. And again, there's private sector, nonprofit, and municipal actions that have been taken, and I think continue. And we also, are seeing, like I said, global or at least national, trends are impacting Juneau, whether it's, so again, I think keeping a close pulse on some of these priority things, whether it's through, city staff or JEDC or, a follow-up work like this. But again, it is complex. And I think being able to look back at with the actions, you're focusing on the right things. And this is an area where, again, the slides didn't cover all of the activity, that's been going on in this area. So I think it's a shared effort.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to have a cluster of questions, and I think we're all sort of on the what and what do we do sort of thing, especially when it doesn't match our experience or what we're hearing anecdotally. So I tried to dig into this area of the report, but I was also just so surprised. So to clarify, to double check my understanding, the data, you're taking this from the Department of Labor, correct? Or is that?
Some from labor, some of the data come from Housing Finance Authority.
Okay, so it's a mixture of that. It's for my fellow assembly members, you can really go down a rabbit hole if you read about the Alaska Department of Labor, how they do the rent survey. I have a slightly silly question just because it is called out in multiple places, but the adjusted rates include estimated utilities costs. So does it have anything to do with, like, if I'm thinking about the utilities fully separate from the price of housing, could you explain how those two things intertwine? Or for instance, not saying this is because I'd have to look back at my years, but the price of oil crashed or something like that. Would that reflect because you're trying to capture that? Or if you could just talk about that a little bit. Question mark.
And I personally am a little less familiar with some of the underlying data. Some of the assembly members may actually be more, again, Jim is our senior economist, has waded through that for 35 plus years. And, but I'm happy to work with him as a follow-up, and, if we can, I'll take note of the questions, and if we could provide a little more information or some insights that I just don't have top of mind.
Okay,
Just,
I can follow up with some of these
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
Okay, I'll stop there then.
well, as again, he's out of town today, but you just let him know there was a lot of interest and a lot of question about what, the housing, and see where we can just tease some additional information out.
Okay, thanks.
And Mr. Bryson.
Madam Chair, I had an answer to Mr. Pohl's question about how could rents seem to go down prior to the pandemic, starting at 2015 and, headed towards the pandemic. Interest rates continued to drop, reaching record lows, and significant point drops on interest rates when you're buying multifamily housing does impact how much rent that you have to collect. At the same time, once the pandemic did hit, there was a eviction moratorium. There were people with job issues. And so that was not the time to raise rents. In fact, landlords worked with their tenants to keep them, keep everybody together. They had, banks had forbearance. And that, so we did initially some rental relief, but then the federal government did 1 year of rental relief. Most landlords, you got to, wherever your rent was at, that's what you got for the next year. And what this did is it not only paid the same rent for a year instead of allowing to adjust for inflation, but then it also kept people in their places longer, whereas there would have been more turnover. If your rent's paid for a year, you're just going to stay there. And once we were coming out of that phase of everybody's apartments being paid for a year, that's when the housing market started to go up. So if you were in a place and you were current with your rent, you didn't have to go anywhere, you were probably paying a lower rent than any other place that you could go find. And so a lot of stagnation, and I saw that there were actually more single family homes that were or multifamily houses that were sold. But if the landlord's not turning over and your tenants aren't turning over, your rents are going to stay flat, and inflationary wise, you're losing ground. But there were a whole bunch of factors that kept people in place for longer, which keeps rents flat. And then, the couple other things I stated, that was my answer from this. Well, I hope that helps everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Glarszewski, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you noticed a lot of questions on this. So this whole section, I just heard from Ms. Yuskian, said adjusted rent includes things that I didn't know were in there. So any of these tables, if you could define what that is, that might help some of the, the confusion. If adjusted rent includes utilities, that could be part of it. And also you say some of it's from Department of Labor, some of it's from AHFC. If you could say which possibly one column is from one and one column is from the other, it's not clear. That would be helpful. And I wasn't going to ask you the question that everybody asked, which is what happened to the 717 housing units that got built and our population declined and we have no housing.
You just asked.
I know. I'm just saying, it is clearly of interest to us. So if there are any data from any source that explains any of it, we would love it. Because we're, struggling with what happened to all that. Thank you.
You got that? I do want to remind the committee before our next committee of the whole, it might be a good idea to read the housing action plan, which I think has maybe not all of the answers to these questions, but probably some useful background information before we have that conversation next week or a week after, whenever that is. Monday. I also want to check online if either Mr. Smith or Will Gadak, if either of you have questions, if you could raise your hand on Zoom. Okay, we can keep going.
Well, and just as you mentioned, the housing action plan, Chair Treem, there was, when that was completed, there was an annual goal of 66 new units. And for those of you who had a chance in looking through the report, there's a table on page 42, table 17, that shows there, those 66 units it's not an annual average. The actual reality is that there's in some years more growth in multifamily housing. Some years there's more momentum around the single family housing. So just, again, as you mentioned that report, that couple of peak years in 2014, 2016, there were over 200 new units added to Juno, and in 2019, nearly 200 with 183. So again, that, some of that, I appreciate Assemblymember Bryson's comments just about the complexity of, not only the pandemic related forces, but just, interest, access to land, other things that are underlying some of these things. So again, as Mr. Calvin returns, I've taken some notes on the nature of the questions, and we'll look to see what we can augment, because I know it will remain an issue. So second to last slide here just recognizes that there were some things not identified at the time the Juno Economic Plan was written, but are clearly forces in the economy. And here, we're noting that between some of the Alaska Native organizations and entities in this community, Search, Central Council, Tlingit and Haida, See Alaska Heritage. We noted that, the Arts Plaza and the Sobeloff building, but there's a tremendous number of other programs that are going on having to do with literacy and art and culture, not just the facilities or using they're using the facilities for delivery of programs. See Alaska, Gold Belt, Huna Totem, and others. There's, significant momentum. Jim estimated and team estimated over 1,000 jobs with Search and Tlingit and Central Council as, being leaders. And, this is an area just thinking, again, going forward, there could be more understanding of where there's momentum and what, just either stand out of their way or support, but it's again something not called out in Juno Economic Plan as clearly as we see the numbers here. And the last slide, takeaways, just a few points that I mentioned it briefly, and you also noted it, that there's a lot of organizations that are involved in creating and sustaining the economy. And a lot of a lot of these organizations were engaged during the development of the plan, and their work has been noted in this progress report, but certainly the Chamber, Juno Economic Development Council, Downtown Business Association, Visit Juno, and Juno Community Foundation and others. There's again, having some measures and some priorities that people know where to put their energy. It's again, community effort. We touched on this, the national labor market is, we're seeing it, in this update progress report, a lot of people stepped out, but for family reasons, childcare reasons, or just made priority decisions about their family and quality of life, and have stepped out of the labor market. And we're feeling that shortage, but we're in a national labor market, and the course, staying the course on housing, childcare, and education as priorities will, continue to, those things underpin our economy and are foundational. So again, that's the end of my prepared remarks. Certainly work with Jim and team again to just see what else we can tease out of data or interviews on housing, knowing it's such a critical issue.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Bell? Ms. Hale?
It's not so much a question as a comment. And I was just trying to figure out, I remember us discussing having this report updated. I don't know if it was during the budget time last year, but I just want to thank Ms. Bell for the work that McKinley did and thank the Assembly for actually directing this update. I think it's very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Rogers.
If you'll indulge me, I might just ask Ms. Spiegel to go to page 36. I feel some obligation, page 62 of the packet, I'm sorry, page 36 of the report. My predecessor and his predecessor focused inordinately on the decline in state employment. And we've talked a little bit about it around the edges, but this page of the report captures it well. We have lost a lot of state jobs. We continue to lose state jobs. I don't have any reason to believe that trend changes. Juno is changing, and certainly my predecessors believed that the health of Juno's economy depended a lot on state employment, and that decline in state employment would inevitably result in some decline in economic activity locally, and it probably has. But as I think the other narrative, which I think we might want to invest some time in this committee talking about, is that, yeah, we've lost a lot of state jobs, but we gained a lot of tourism jobs and we gained a lot of mining jobs, and our economy became more diverse, which is inherently more durable and more stable. And I've also speculated, and I don't have the data to prove it, but I think we could prove it up. We've also gained a lot of state retirees. A lot of those people who occupied those jobs are still here and still drawing a retirement, still spending money in the community. So it's the one piece of the report that I wanted to draw some attention to, because my predecessors cared a lot about that subject, as did previous assemblies. I think it's still an issue we haven't focused on in the last couple of years, but it's writ large in these numbers. We have lost a lot of state jobs. The impact, I think, hasn't been quite what we expected because other parts of the economy have thrived. And I speculate that the addition of retirees has really made a big difference. It has blunted the impact of losing state jobs. But obviously those retirees won't be here forever. And when they're gone, there's no replacing them in the same way that we replace a new worker into a job, right? Anyways, thank you for the indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Ms. Bell, thank you for joining us tonight. Please go enjoy the sunshine for us. And I think item B should not take us too long, so we can do that before break, if that sounds good to everybody. Okay. We will move on to agenda topic B, waiver of Wildflower Court bond debt requirements. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Chair Treem. So this is a fairly straightforward issue. In 1999, Wildflower Court was authorized to receive conduit debt financing for its facility adjacent to Bartlett Regional Hospital. Those bonds were refinanced in 2012, and they're scheduled to pay off in 2025. Wildflower Court, like many borrowers through the bond bank, failed to meet a coverage requirement during the pandemic. The bond bank has received many notifications, disclosures of having missed a coverage requirement. So Wildflower Court has done what they're obligated to do, which just disclosed to us that they failed to meet that coverage requirement. And the thing that the original bond covenant required when a borrower failed to meet its coverage requirement was the requirement of a rate and revenue study. And you can imagine that that would be essential if we had a revenue producing organization that couldn't meet its revenue bond obligations in a normal environment, right? Somebody would come in and say, simply, your rates are not high enough. You need to increase your rates in such and such a way to develop more revenue in order to meet the covenant. What's happened during the pandemic is that the rates and the rate structure weren't the issue. It was not, many organizations that were borrowers were simply not able to provide the service. It's very much akin to our docs, right? We had mechanisms and savings that allowed us to continue making bond debt payments, but no ships came for 2 years. So we don't obviously need a rate and revenue study to tell us that no ships came for 2 years. We just need ships to come back, or we have a much bigger problem. And it's very much the same for Wildflower Court. So the action that we are recommending is that the Assembly Finance Committee waive the requirement for Wildflower Court to seek that rate and revenue study. And I have been notified that staff of the Alaska Municipal Bond Bank Authority will do the same, and the bond bank similarly, unless they overrule staff, will follow the same and waive the requirement of that study. It's pretty much that simple. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to take them.
Ms. Oh, okay, sure. Ms. Gladchevsky.
I move that the Assembly Finance Committee waive, not require a rate study.
I see no objection. That motion passes. We will take a 10-minute break and come back at 7. And we're back. And we are moving on to the fun parts of the agenda. Agenda topic C, exemption of sales tax on food. Mr. Rogers, will you kick us off?
Thank you, Chair Treem. Obviously, there is a memo of a few pages that's fairly dense in the packet, addressing many questions that have come up and other items for consideration. So we can talk through any of that. That's helpful. I did get a question from an Assembly member in this intervening time, and I think it's useful for me to walk through again the way the calculation works. And I think for the purpose of today, I wish I could make that bigger, but I just really can't. I'm only going to walk through just the basic math, and I'm not going to look at it by income quintile. And I'll tell you why. I've lost confidence a little bit that the income quintile view that we've looked at is accurate enough. I think it does give you a good impression of how it affects people of different incomes, but there are too many extrapolations for me to say, yes, this is what I think really would happen. I think that we are likely in a position where the average by household is certainly reasonable. That's more easily calculated. But when we start thinking about individuals at various income, we simply don't have enough Juno-based or even Alaska-based data. There's not the big Department of Labor consumer expenditure report doesn't come out by state. It only comes out nationally in a few select regions. There's just, as many of you know, just getting good Alaska data is really hard. And so I'm going to focus on this, which is all households. And what this is right now is the proposal that's being considered, but I can actually move it back, which I'll do for the purpose of discussion. So this takes us back to what we have today. This is status quo. 5% sales tax on food, 5% sales tax on non-food in both the winter and the summer. And just to walk through this, the amount spent on food by an average household in Juneau, again, a lot of extrapolations here, but this is, I think for all households, this is a reasonable assumption, about $9,000 a year. That might sound like a lot to you. It might sound like a little to you, but probably it's in the ballpark. 57,000 a year spent on other taxable sales. That's a sizable number. Will be a lot of variation there based on your income and your means and your spending habits. But take those two for now. And the critical thing here is that in that average household assumption, that average household would pay $455 a year in sales tax on food for home, and then it would spend about $2,900 a year on sales tax for all other items. So the average household in Juneau would spend about a little more than $3,300 a year. And just the other calculations that are happening here, there's no savings, no change in revenue loss, right? So if I do what's been contemplated, which is that I exempt food and make the summer rate 6%, at a bottom line, we get down to our $143, but this is the bit of math that I wanted to do so that it's clear. It's not that the $143 of savings comes from food. The amount of savings that comes from food is $455. It's that the $455 of savings on food is offset by $312 of additional tax paid on things in the summer at a higher rate. And so that little bit of math has been misunderstood by many, not just any of you, but by many. And I've had to kind of re-explain this. So I'm getting a little better at making it clear. So again, the key difference here is that instead of $455 of sales tax on food, you would then pay $0. And instead of $2,900 in food, you'd pay something more like $32. And the difference between those two, the net change, is $143 of savings per resident household. And that's the exact, I haven't changed anything about the numbers. This is the exact same math, the exact same data set we've been using. I just wanted to illustrate that math a little differently because many people have tried to use $143 and back into numbers, which makes a lot of sense. You just can't quite do that. You've got to separate food from non-food.
Ms. Hale.
Thank you. This is really helpful. And I can't do the math fast enough in my head. But what you're saying is is it a 5-month period of time where it would go from 5% to 6%?
It's 6 months.
6 months. So that additional 1% over those 6 months would mean on average, how much more? 300?
Correct. $312 additional in the summer.
Okay, I'll try to do some math. Thanks.
Mr. Bryson.
Ms. Rogers, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rogers, or maybe you're going to get to this, could you plug in the number 5.5 for both for year-round sales tax with 0 on food, so we could see what those numbers would be?
Can you say those numbers for those of us who can't see that far?
So
I mean, I can.
So some of these numbers are on page 84 of your packet, because what I just did for Assemblymember Bryson is on the second row here. The numbers should be exactly the same, and they are. What it tells us is that instead of paying $455 a year on sales tax on food, you'd pay 0. But then residents would pay $288 more on their summer purchases. So there would be a net savings. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Barr. They're year-round purchases for the extra 0.5%. So you would pay an additional $288 of sales tax. So then the net difference is $167. So one of the questions I think you would naturally have is, well, how does that happen? How do we go from a 6% in the summer to a 5.5% year round and everybody's savings goes higher? The simple answer is that CBJ loses a lot more revenue, right? So in the previous proposal, CBJ only lost $500,000 and change. Here we lose at least $1.5 million. So The additional resident savings comes from the fact that CBJ loses more revenue, not from the fact that there's any tax shifting from any one party to any other party.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Any questions on that? Any-
And similarly, I mean, Chair Treem, I can type in 5.6 and 5.7 and 5.9. I mean, you can see what that looks like. Some of that is done in the middle table on page 84 of the packet. I tried all those things. And so at 5.6, CBJ loses 765,000. And at 5.7 year round, there's a net tax gain of 113. But even as you get to something that's closer to even, the resident savings per household goes down for the simple reason that we're not shifting taxes to summer visitors, which is really what the seasonal rate does. That's part of how a seasonal rate is advantageous to residents, is that it shifts the tax burden from residents to visitors.
Mr. Rogers, can you just quickly run us through the math on the property tax proposal? So we can have all these numbers in our mind.
Let me pull up that table and I'll share it so other people can see it. So Chair Treem has asked to think a little bit about this table, which tries to describe some imaginary household. Where.
Oh, Mr. Rogers, your mic is not on.
Oh, thank you. So this table tries to imagine some imaginary households. If you start with the bottom, what we see at the bottom is what we think of as low earners, right? And what we try to do, and the annual income is no part of this calculation. I was just trying to get us rooted in some sense of reasonableness. But we do look at what somebody's presumptive household property value would be, whether they rent or they own, doesn't really matter. The cost of a 1 mil property tax increase to them annually, the amount that family situated that way is likely to spend on food annually, and then the benefit that they would receive from the 5% tax going away. So I'm going to look at the very bottom row. This is what we've called a 2 lower earners large family. That means 2 incomes in a family with, 2 or 3 or 4 kids. Maybe more on the 3 or 4 kids in this category. So we would say that annual income might be $50,000. They might own or rent an apartment, a condo, a trailer, a mobile home, anything of approximately $150,000. So the cost of 1 mil to that family is $150. But if they spend $10,000 a year on food, their benefit from getting food tax-free would be $500. So the benefit to that family is $350. So it means that they're going to pay more in property tax, but they're going to get a benefit from food being untaxed. And the net difference between those is $350. Let me move up to just another category for the purpose of explanation. So move up to 1 high earner, no children, AKA your finance director, right? So annual income somewhere north of $100,000, property value in the $500,000 range, typical price for a single family home here. So the cost of 1 mil in property tax would be $500 to somebody in this category. Annual food expenditure, $10,000. The benefit of tax-free food would be about $500. So for somebody in that category, a higher earner without kids, who owns their own home or rents a $500,000 house, doesn't really matter. They come out about even. Okay. And really, the only way that I can manipulate the table in such a way that it costs anybody more is to presume that somebody has a very high property value. So obviously, once you get above $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, the property value is probably not one's principal residence. It starts to be holdings of commercial properties or vacant land or whatever. So only in those categories does the math indicate to me that somebody comes out worse with tax-free food and a 1 mil increase. Generally speaking, this demonstrates, for the most part, an economic axiom just about the fact that property taxes will be progressive, meaning that they correspond to someone's income or wealth. And sales taxes will be generally regressive, meaning that people of lower income will pay a greater portion of their wage or their income relative to somebody of higher income. We've tried to do this to give some sense of what it would actually mean to contemplate property taxes as the replacement for lost sales taxes rather than a change in the rate. None of these things are popular. We were just trying to illustrate potentially some of the math for people who could situate themselves into any one of these lines.
Ms. Glaszewski.
Just a basic question about for all of these, where the annual food spending estimate is from, or what data is it based on? Or are you guessing, or is there someone somewhere that says how much people spend on food?
I'm guessing. So we do have in the underlying data the number that I showed you previously, which was that the average that the data we have based on Department of Labor data says that the average household in Juneau is spending about $9,000 a year on food.
So that's from where?
It comes from the Department of Labor, but it's been significantly extrapolated to meet what we know we collect in sales tax on food. That's the way the calculation works for all this, is that we know how much sales tax we collect. So I worked backward from that amount to what an individual person or resident pays. This math is not, it's fragile. And it's the reason I've kind of got us away from talking about the income quintiles, because I think it's just a little too extrapolated. I think it illustrates a trend that will hold up. But I think trying to look at any income quintile and saying, okay, how is that person affected? It's just, there's going to be too much variation. And so then on this table, what we really tried to do was say lower income families without children will spend a lot less on food. Higher income families will spend more on food. The larger your family is, the more you spend more on food. We just tried to come up with something that was in the range of an average of $9,000, acknowledging that lower income families do spend a lot less money on food and higher income families spend more.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had some concerns about the 5% and 6%. Would this be an appropriate time to speak to those concerns?
Give me a moment on that. Let's, if there's more questions on the math we've just gone over. I see none. So we have two proposals that would change the sales and we have one proposal that would be a tax rebate, essentially. So we have four different ideas here. Mary Weldon, do you have? Thank you, guys. Yeah, out of control. Okay. Well, okay. So we have now 5 ideas. I'm going to cap it at 5. So how does somebody want to?
Can I just talk about my proposal and you guys can easily, it's a simple proposal.
Okay.
Very simple.
Okay, Mayor Weldon, add your proposal to our
thank you.
list.
It's either you do or don't. Looking at these numbers and getting more and more information from Mr. Rogers, thank you very much. It's making more things clearer all the time. However, just talking to hearing my assembly members talk, I think we're going to be pretty divided on this. And we're all looking for a cleaner answer to see which direction we go. And either way, we need to bring it to the voters. So I'm suggesting we take an advisory vote to the voters, 2 advisory votes. One that says, do you want sales tax taken off by food? If we do that, we will do either a seasonal sales tax or an increase in sales tax. And here's that. And then the other would be, do we take sales tax off food? And if we do that, we would do it, increase your property tax. I think that would provide some of the clarity that we're looking for. I don't care one way or the other personally about taking sales tax off food. I see both sides of the story. It's helping some. I tried to do a little scalpel thing. You guys pretty much squashed that idea. And I'm not getting hounded by people telling me to take sales tax off food, but some of you are saying that you're doing that. I've gone to my son's friends and talked to that age group, which is in their 20s, to see if they care. And could be quite honest, most of them aren't even paying attention. Sorry to say, young group that I'm checking with. So I'm wondering if we do that, because if we do the property tax, this is a much nicer way to see it, I would still like an advisory vote. So either way, we're going to the voters. What that would mean to the people that are supporting the sales tax is you would have to wait a year to actually change the sales tax, but it might be a good way to do it. And the other reason I'm suggesting this is I'm really concerned about putting any kind of sales tax vote to the voters that's not advisory when we're asking for a 1% sales tax. I think that will confuse many voters. So if you guys would ponder that for a minute, think on that. I think it might help us in all aspects. So like I said, I'm not trying to squash anything. I've stood out of the way of this one because I know it's important to several members on the assembly, but I'm just trying to, like our housing dilemma, we're just trying to find a clearer answers, and I'll stop.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am less familiar with advisory votes. Maybe someone can give me the skinny on what that entails, by when, and what it holds us accountable to or doesn't.
Mr. Palmer.
Attorney come up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Ms. Stream. So I was trying to capture what the mayor was saying, but the overarching concept here is an advisory vote goes to the voters to give the assembly some direction, some comfort. It's not binding. It's whatever the language is that you ask is specific and narrow, and that's the question the voters are asked. So if the facts change or if the question is a little different afterwards, then you have to just kind of make your best guess on what the voters would do based on the outcome that they gave you in the October election.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. And just to clarify, the property tax method, we don't need to go to the voters on that. If we wanted to do it by the 13th, we could, because we control the mill rate, and we can exempt a category without getting voter approval, or we could wait until next year to do that. But that one doesn't require a vote like the two sales tax proposals do. Just to get that clarification out there. Okay, so we have 4 proposals. I think we're gonna drop the scalpel.
Yeah, that was my question. First of all, are we dropping the scalpel? Can we drop the scalpel? What is the scalpel?
Tax rebate.
Madam Chair, I will withdraw the tax rebate for low income household, even though it's a great idea.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Weldon. Ms. Hale.
I just wanted to clarify, I believe that another thing that we could do without a vote is we could exempt food.
Correct.
Correct.
That doesn't fill any buckets, but we could do that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Gladys.
So if I understand correctly, we have the seasonal sales tax 6 and 5, the year round 5.5 year round, and then mill rate.
Correct.
So let's see if I can get one of these off the table.
Okay.
And that would be the year round one. And that is because in part, it doesn't fill up enough of the bucket. We're still missing a bunch of money. So, and I know it's easier for merchants. And the other reason for me is if I'm a voter and I'm sitting there thinking, do I want to take sales tax off of food? if I personally would be more likely to vote for the 6% one because I know that visitors will be paying more. But if it's 5.5 year round, it's just like I just increasing the sales tax on myself. And that doesn't seem like I'm getting anything out of it. So that's just my personal opinion. So I'm wondering where we are, if there are 5 votes to move that one or not. So that's my question. I think that,
Make a motion and then we'll have.
sure, I'll move I would move to put on the ballot a year-round 5.5% sales tax rate for the voters, and I would speak against it. I just did, so.
Thank you, Ms. Godchevsky. Mr. Bryson, I don't want to forget you, so why don't you go ahead next if you'd like to.
All right. So I really appreciate what everybody's saying. I agree with a lot of stuff. However, the 6% seasonal tax is bad. It will directly harm 2 businesses that I own. And I know plenty of business owners that they can tell you how it will harm their business. It will make the cost of doing business more expensive in the summer for local businesses. That raises the cost of living, which has been one of the directives that the community's asked us to lower. So 6% in the summer, not only has the chamber spoken against that, but if you talk to a business owner, especially a business owner that does not cater to tourism, I mean, it's just deliberately harming local businesses. I mean, I literally own one that I can tell you at least 6 ways that it would harm it. So my recommendation was to remove the seasonal sales tax was going to be the proposal I had, because not only has the chamber spoken against it, but we can start to come up with the ways that it's going to harm the business. And I actually like the 0.5% year round. While I'm not tied to it, I saw that as a better way than the 6% would become a punishment to local businesses that cater to Junoites only. While there would be some benefits, there would be plenty of negative consequences of that. I wanted to speak to I like the mayor's idea. I wanted to point something out to you. We have ordinances. We were going to ask the Juno voters to pick or to decide on 3 sales tax initiatives. Do you want the temporary 1%? And then the next question could be, do you want the sales tax to be 5.5% year round? And they're like, wait a second, are we adding 1% or are we doing 5% year round? And then the next question is, do you want 5% and 6% in the summertime? We would add so much confusion. We would get no votes across the board. I believe that we would lose the 1% sales tax if we put all 3 ballot initiative or the sales tax advisory votes on this. I would rather us get the 1% sales tax. The other question we're going to have on this ballot more than likely is, can we bond for a city hall? So if we ask major questions and then we throw in 2 sales tax questions, we're setting ourselves up for failure because we're making the ballot too confusing. So while I support this, and my crazy out of the box idea was going to be to implement removing sales tax on January 1st of 23, so that we only have half a year that we have to fill the bucket up the first year out. It's not a great solution. It doesn't have all the answers, but it does let us get out of the gate. It does let us remove sales tax for the small price tag of only $3 million. And it gives us more time to figure out how we adjust expenses and revenue so that we can accommodate that tax. I think that covers all the things that I've been contemplating on these very deep questions. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just point of order? I was just trying to see if there were 5 votes for things. So,
That's what we're doing.
okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't know if there's 5 votes for anything. So
We're going to find out. Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I have next Ms. Hale, then Ms. Wall, then Mr. Smith, then Ms. Hughes-Candies. Ms. Hale,
Excuse me.
when you're ready.
Sorry about that. Because we did not have an opportunity to discuss Mayor Weldon's idea of the advisory vote, I wonder if I might ask Ms. Gladchevsky to, whatever you do, walk back that motion until we can talk about Mayor Weldon's advisory vote idea. Because otherwise we're talking about everything at once and it's starting to be a little bit confusing. Is that possible, Madam Chair, or do you want us to just to kind of?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best way to do this because at some point we're gonna have to talk about them one by one to decide, you know, up or down on them. I don't think we can have all of that in one kind of conversation.
I was just hoping that we could actually kind of do it one by one. And Mayor Weldon put out an idea, but we never got a chance to talk about it and we moved on to the next thing. And so I'm just wondering if we could do that.
I did not intend to shut down conversation on the advisory vote idea. I think that's still an option that's out there. We have 3 different proposals to discuss and the advisory vote discussion. Those I view the advisory vote discussion as somewhat separate from the 3 different proposals. And we have to discuss all 4 of those things tonight. And this is just kind of the order that it's going in at the moment.
Oh, okay. So I'll wait to talk about the advisory vote proposal later, I guess. I don't think it's a good idea, but I'll wait.
We will have the chance to talk about that.
Again, I was just trying to do one at a time.
Yeah.
If I could, I think that my problem with doing them one at a time before we talk about this fresh new idea is then we don't know what's going to happen with this fresh new idea. And so we're going to be trying to figure out strategically, what do we vote for or against if we want this to pass? And so that's my only concern, but I'm fine. Thank you.
Maybe. I'm thinking. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there are a few ways to have this conversation, but we can circle back to things and revisit votes, I think, if we mess up in a way that doesn't allow members to have their wishes granted. So I'm going to speak to Ms. Gladchevsky's motion. I also, where were we? I also oppose her motion in addition to her opposition. I think the year-round increase doesn't really meet our goals. It shifts money around in ways that, you know, we don't have full confidence what the impacts are going to be. And I know there's been some conversation about, you know, when you shift it to summer, who's impacted in the summer, but when you shifted it to the winter, you're definitely impacting people who are paying, who a large part of what they're paying is their utilities, just like food. And so I think that if we're exempting food and then shifting that burden to seniors and SNAP eligible folks, as well as other folks who aren't currently tax exempt on food, their utilities in the winter are going to go up. So I'm supportive of taking that one off the list, whether we do an advisory vote or we don't, because I don't think it meets our goals.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was kind of similar to Ms. Hale's in that should we focus on the discussion of advisory vote versus action first. I guess as I kind of was reading through the packet and hearing from Mr. Rogers and thinking more about this, and I think even though maybe I spoke against in a former meeting, the property tax actually, I think it's worth considering. I'm thinking I have some issues in that we have a very compressed timeline and that the ordinance would be under action in less than 2 weeks. No real question, I guess. Good luck refereeing this one though, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'll continue to sit and listen.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Miss Euskanies.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I recognize the difficulty in how we should deal with this one tonight. I initially, Ms. Hale also had process questions or confusion about the best way to do this. If we're trying right now to just go through them and see, are there enough of us to kill one of these ideas to simplify our discussion tonight? I think that's fine and good. And I would hope that, because I think in general, I could be wrong, but I think in general, we all are trying to get to the goal of removing sales tax from food and finding something that we find palatable. So we can always go back, I guess, and redo if we screw up, if we get to the end of the line and we find that we've said no to everything. So just saying that out loud to reassure myself. With that, I would say I'm not a fan. It's too much funding and it's just moving things around. So I would also kill that one.
Mr. Bryson.
So.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my understanding, because I've seen the page that, or I'm seeing where Ms. Hale's at. I'm seeing the question that we have in front of us. And I think what we're trying to do we kind of want to work with the mayor's idea of an advisory vote, but we're trying to have the discussion. What if we don't even want to ask that question, or do we want to ask the question? I think right now the question is, do we want to ask the citizens? Madam Gladysevsky was saying yes or no to 5.5 year round. I would pose the question, would we say yes or no to 6% in the summer? If we could have a brief discussion on those two, which are the two that we have ordinances for, those, if we don't pick those two, then there's no need for an advisory vote. But if we get stuck with, or if we decide, yeah, we like one of those options and maybe one of the other ones comes in, then we can have, okay, do we want to present this in an advisory vote manner? Does that help me get? I'm trying to get on the same page to say, oh, but it is like be in the same process that we're in. So if we called the question right now on 5.5% year round, can I call? I'll just ask you to call the question.
Sure.
Let's see who.
Anyone's for it.
I just want to make sure anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak on this would get that chance if they wanted to. So I think Mr. Smith or Walal Gadak, if you, okay.
I do have a question about calling the question.
Okay, Ms. Hale, your question about calling the question.
Yeah, I keep hearing us saying that we could back out of all of these. And then I also hear that we're talking about killing that idea. So are we killing it, or are we just tabling it? We're not tabling it. Can we back out of it? I don't know if we're killing it or not. So what is the question? I guess is my question.
The motion is to put 5.5% to forward the ordinance back to the assembly to put 5.5% sales tax, remove sales tax from food and have a year-round tax of 5.5%. Put that question to the voters. I spoke against that. I don't think we should do that. I was just trying to reduce the number of things so that if we do get to an advisory part, we're only advising about two things, if that ever happens. But
yeah,
that's a whole different question, and I'm not going to talk about that because we're talking about this motion.
So
are there 5 votes to support putting this on the ballot?
the 5.5.
The 5.5
year-round proposal, and Mr. Bryson maybe explained my thought process better than I did. I don't view so the 3 proposals we have that would change some tax rate are mutually exclusive. Maybe not technically, but in real life, mutually exclusive. The advisory vote question is not mutually exclusive with either of those. So if we decide a path on those 3 proposals to move forward, we can also then have a discussion about the advisory vote. Does that make sense to you, Ms. Hale, or
It does, but I'm also looking to our Mr. Attorney that if we vote on one of these things, for example, that we are not going to forward the 5.5% year-round sales tax increase to the assembly, is that a done deal and we can't go back to that, Mr. Attorney?
Through the chair, Ms. Hale, you can always move to rescind a previously adopted motion. And so if that's the will of the body at that time, you can definitely do it. Give me one moment.
You can always say,
I thought the phrase was notice of reconsideration.
no,
Is that-
that's
that's
separate
not-
thing.
That's different. phrase?
But you can always say, move to suspend the rules and then you
Yeah.
can do whatever the hell you want.
That's true. We can,
But I mean.
I will,
that's okay.
I will get you Miss Hale, I'll get you an answer. It's no more than 6. It may be 5. I don't have that answer on the tip of my tongue right now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And yeah, we do have a motion. We have objection. I think there's no more discussion. So Ms. Spiegel, will you please call our roll?
Thank you, Chair Dream. Assemblymember Gladys
No.
Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale,
Yes.
Assemblymember Wachlall Gadak,
No.
Mayor Weldon,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
No.
Assemblymember Bryson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Wall,
No.
Chair Dream.
No.
Motion fails, 4 ayes, 5 nays.
Okay. Mr. Bryson,
It's the phrase, notice of. I was gonna say notice of reconsideration, but that's the wrong phrase. What do we just say? Notice of,
do you want to?
You want to,
oh, sorry, nope.
Okay. So we've narrowed down our options tonight, so who wants to go next? Ms. Hughes Scandies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that we take sales tax off of food and we replace the lost revenue with a one mill rate. 1 mil is what I'm trying to say. Increase. And I
Would you
can-
like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. So I think while Mr. Rogers has done a really good job of getting us adjusted to the idea that this math is not rock solid and we may need to make adjustments along the way. That's not something he said, but there's not a ton of confidence in all of these projections. I feel like based on the tables and based on my read of the memo, it is clear to me that as somebody who does feel pretty strongly about removing sales tax on food, that this increase to the mill rate of 1 is the sort of most progressive thing that we could do. And with that fragility of the math is much more straightforward. I am open to, I don't want to talk for a long time about it. You've heard my argument before, so I'll just leave it there and see what members think.
Mayor Weldon and then Mr. Bryson.
Thank you. I would object and I would actually ask Ms. Hughes Scandies to withdraw her motion because this is what I believe the time to talk about an advisory vote. We have now basically narrowed it down to 2 choices and they're good choices for advisory votes to the public. And the only way I would agree to the mill rate, which I think is a good idea, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, is if we had advisory vote anyway. I don't think it's right for this body to increase our mill rate by a whole 1.0 mils without asking the public.
I guess a follow-up to that, to my understanding, we have 3 options right now, and this was one of them. If we get it down to 2, I think it would be appropriate then to talk about,
It's down to 2 now.
is that, we're down to 2. Then I will, I guess, Madam Chair, could you clarify that? Because I don't want to do things out of order and I don't want to mess with that.
We have this idea. We have not yet discussed the seasonal sales tax rate idea. I guess I personally would prefer to discuss the ideas separate from the advisory vote, but I would need 5 friends to agree with me on that one, so I won't try to make that a blanket statement. We have an objection, but it looks like there is more discussion to be had. So if your motion is still on the table, I will go down the list of people who want to talk about it.
I just wanted to clarify something. So there are 2 left, the seasonal and the mill rate. So, okay. And then the third is the advisory. So 2 substantive things and the third is whatever. And my only comment now would be if we did I don't want to talk about the advisory vote. Never mind. That's a different time.
Madam Chair, can we take a 5-minute or 2-minute at ease?
Yeah. We are back. Miss Hughes-Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to withdraw that motion, and may I make another motion?
Go ahead.
I would move for discussion the concept of paying for removing sales tax from food by increasing the mill rate by 1. And the reason I'm jumping to make this and kind of getting out of order is because I would really like to get a sense of how people feel in concept, how close we might be to being okay with that idea to increasing the mill rate. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Miss Hughes-Candies. Ms. Hale.
Thank you. So I think what you're saying is this is just discussion, Ms. Hughes-Candies, and if this is just discussion, I don't like the idea of increasing the mill rate. This has come up very recently, and I think it would put an enormous shock wave into our community. And I just don't like the idea.
Ms. Gladys-Shevsky.
Sure, I appreciate. I've always been possibly open to mill rate changes to fill the bucket. 1 mill, however, is beyond my capacity to do so. And part of the reason is if we just filled it with that, it would all be paid by Juno citizens. And if it was partially paid by sales tax, partially paid by property tax, that would be more appealing to me. But just increasing the mill rate, especially right now, I mean, it's always a bad time, but property values have gone up. People are, it's super hard to find housing. It just seems like a doubly bad time to do it. Even though the numbers do make it look like it would accomplish my goals in this effort. But for those other reasons, I'd be a no right now.
Mr. Bryson.
Well, I completely understand why folks would be against balancing the budget of removing sales tax on food on the backs of property tax. I do see it as, well, it's unfortunate that we're not able to tax the tourism, the tourists that come to our community more. It's still a more fair tax than a regressive sales tax. So while we can capture sales tax from tourists, we do that as a penalty to our most vulnerable population in Juno. Whereas with property tax, it's a little bit more balanced out. Even in, I liked Mr. Rogers' graph, when you have a lower income family, they pay lower property tax and it has less of an impact, and they had more savings at the lower levels. So the very families that we're trying to benefit have a higher savings per year by adding the mill rate. So I would be in a strong favor of the property tax on the advisory vote. Because if the community said to us, we're okay paying a little bit more for property tax to remove sales tax, that's a solution and approval from the community. So while we're having this discussion with the option of a advisory vote as an option for us, putting we'll save you sales tax on food in exchange for one mill rate, directly asking that the citizens on an advisory vote, I would strongly support that, because especially if they said yes, I mean, that gives us a very fair and clear way to move forward. Thank you for the time on that topic, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I'll speak in favor of this proposal. I think that this is the one that best accomplishes our goal of helping those families that have the lowest amount of income. And we can see that clearly on the table that Mr. Rogers has given us. I know that we are concerned about the cost of living, but the dollars that a family pays for their property taxes come out of the same wallet that the dollars they pay in sales tax come out of. So I think they clearly are benefiting from the property tax proposal more than they are from either of the sales tax proposals. And I would also say that this cost is not going to be directly borne by tourists, but there's no doubt in my mind that those businesses that operate are paying sales tax on their buildings that operate in the tourism industry are going to pass those costs on to their customers. So we are also getting that benefit. And finally, I think that if we do go the route of putting this as an advisory vote, it is the least confusing of the options, because we are talking about property taxes and not sales taxes. And I think that that will help us the most when it comes to the kind of confusion issue that we're afraid of with our 1% sales tax proposition that will be on the ballot. So I think that Ms. Huskandis has come up with a really brilliant idea here, and I'm strongly in favor of it. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I just have my only kind of lament is that I hadn't been more open to the idea, or anyway, that I hadn't thought more deeply about it, or we hadn't discussed it more fully earlier, because I do like the idea. I have obviously some shakiness in the numbers, but I think, you know, changing them slightly or whatever. I mean, I think the math and the balance is somewhat similar. I guess a big issue for me is just that it would be relatively quick acting, and that we'd be making this change in, you know, again, less than 2 weeks, and not having really good chance to hear from the public. I like the idea too. I think it in my mind, it's probably too quick to try to do this year, which is unfortunate. But anyway, I'm open to looking at it as an advisory vote as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Wildflower Gadak.
I don't have anything to add other than what's already been said. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Ms. Wall and then Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not supportive of sending this as is or making this change in the next 2 weeks. I think that I very much hear that, you know, from the kind of views of this as a progressive tax that meets our goals, that this is kind of the clear, obvious one that does that. But I also agree that with Ms. Gladishevsky that we have an opportunity to, you know, include non-residents in this opportunity to fill our revenue. And then I think the other thing is, you know, equity is, you know, really important, but so is our citizens' kind of faith in government. And you may, as a citizen, may experience savings every time you go and buy groceries, but they're so small that you're not going to notice them. Whereas when people get their property tax bill, they notice that. And so even if we are actually being more equitable in how we tax, if people aren't viewing it that way, then it can have other impacts. So this is a big jump for me, I think. Whether advisory vote, you know, I might be open to that when we get to that discussion, but I wouldn't be supportive of us changing the mill rate in the next 2 weeks.
And just to be clear, that's not what Ms. Uscandi's motion was.
She didn't make the motion, so I didn't know what.
I did. It was vague. It was a motion for discussion because it was a motion to see how conceptually how people felt about the mill rate as a way of filling the bucket.
Okay, so advisory vote or non.
It didn't even bring up advisory vote because that's a complicating factor. And we haven't had a chance in a committee setting to, you know, I lobbed that as a grenade whenever we last said it and said, well, what about the mill rate? You know, as we're also trying to set our mill rate in the budget cycle of things. So this is the first time we've had the opportunity to say, let's hear from one another. Are people open to that? I understand that's a big change. So I appreciate people taking a motion just for discussion.
Ms. Gladys.
So Madam Chair, just to again, so there was not a motion about the mill rate issue. So I'd make one. I'd move that we raise the mill rate a mill.
We do have a motion. on the
We,
floor.
Matt,
But we already.
Ms.
I thought we were done.
Gladys, I rescinded a motion I withdrew a motion and I made another motion
To talk about it.
to talk about it. And as part of the taking it at ease, I was asking the attorney, is that a valid motion? So that's the motion we're on right now, which is to talk about it until the chair or someone makes another motion.
I just tried to.
But there was a motion. So it was a point of order on my part.
I understand, but if we're not going to vote, are we going to vote on that motion?
That was my intention.
On Ms. Hughes
This
Gandy's
is-
motion to talk about it?
The Ms. Uscandi's motion was about a general sense of support for the concept. It was not about doing it on the 13th. I think it's to potentially move this option forward when we get to the advisory vote discussion. So that we can keep that on the table if we move to the advisory vote discussion.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I always thought it could be on the table for the advisory vote. I thought we were trying to talk about whether or not eventually we were going to put the mill rate issue or do something about the mill rate. So that's all. If we're not done with this motion, I'm fine. But I thought we had to do that because that was one of the things we were going to do. I thought that was one of the options we were going to vote on. So whenever that's possible.
Okay, that's what this conversation is. Mr. Bryson.
So the possible,
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I did miss you. I apologize. Ms. Hale.
I appreciate that. I've been, because we weren't talking about the advisory vote, I have been studiously avoiding talking about the advisory vote. And I also can't seem to speak. But people keep talking about it. So I actually really don't know what we're talking about because talking about the 1 mill increase going on the ballot is very different than talking about an advisory vote that talks about a 1 mill increase. And so I would really like to bifurcate. I would like to be very clean about what we're actually talking about, because that clarity doesn't seem to be present in this discussion. Are we talking about the mill rate increase as an ordinance or on the ballot, or are we talking about it as a possibility for an advisory vote? And those are two very different things in my mind.
Mr. Bryson.
thank you, Madam Chair. I think I have the answer to Ms. Hale's question. The question or the motion that I understood Ms. Uscandi's to make was, do you like the 1% option, or do we not like the 1% option? So if we had a question on it, that would be 1 mil. I'm sorry, did I say the wrong thing? So 1 mil or not 1 mil? Do we like it or do we not like it? I thought I understood you correctly. So the motion that we are discussing right now is, do you like adding 1 mil or do you not like adding 1 mil? And that can be separate from the advisory vote. We're just, do we like increasing 1 mil or not? I thought that's what I tried to keep my comments to that when I spoke. Does that help, Ms. Hale?
Mayor Weldon.
Let's get the mud out. I appreciate Ms. Huscani's bringing this forward to talk about it, because as she said, we haven't talked about it much, and it is a very interesting concept. So I find myself very torn. I mean, it definitely gets rid of the regressiveness of a sales tax for the less fortunate folks in our community. And it definitely puts pressure on the people that have more property. So that's intriguing. But at the same time, I'm looking at the numbers, just hoping that Mr. Rogers is right about how much it's going to cost each one of us, and hoping those numbers are right. So I'm supportive of continuing to look at the issue, but this is where, sorry, I'm going to confuse you, Ms. Hale. I again would not want to do this without a vote to the public. And I'm sorry for that, but 1 mil is quite a bit big mill rate increase.
And we have some hard deadlines. So I'm hoping in this meeting, we can help ourselves in the future by narrowing down our options. And I would like to, so this is the option of the mill rate increase, so that when we get to the advisory vote discussion, we are either leaving that on the table for the advisory vote discussion, or we're taking that off the table before we get to the advisory vote discussion. Ms. Gladysewski.
So again, process question. The advisory vote discussion is a separate thing. I thought that the one question is, are we going to increase the mill rate by 1 mil this year? Are we not ever talking about, nobody wants to do that? I thought that's what we want.
Not in this meeting. I don't think that's the.
But that would have to be this meeting if we were going to do it this year.
Well, it could happen on the 13th.
I just I'm trying to get things off and on the table too. So I'm happy to, I personally would be happy to continue talking about the mill rate issue. That's different from, do I want to increase the mill rate this year? Because I would be a no on that. So when are we going to get to that one?
I don't think anybody wants to do that.
Nobody wants to do that. Okay. Fair.
We haven't taken a vote on that. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. If that's true, I just thought we were trying to do it this year. So if we're not, then.
I mean, I can't promise nobody's going to do that on the 13th, but it's not happening in this meeting. Mayor Weldon.
Just to remind Ms. Glasser, what she's probably remembering, it's a very confusing discussion. If we decide to change the mill rate, we do not need to have a vote on it. So we're not tied to the 13th at all whatsoever. However, that's why I'm saying I'm not against the idea. I think she did come up with a pretty good idea. I'm just saying I would like to have the public weigh in on an advisory vote on this one.
We are tied to the 13th for this year. We have to set the mill rate well by the 15th, but yeah. So, but I don't think anybody in this meeting is intending to do that. I can't promise nobody's going to do it on the 13th. Bring it up as a amendment, but not in this meeting. And that's not what this motion is about. This motion is about the concept so that we can either talk about an advisory vote for this or just clear it off the table because nobody wants to do it. Okay. Ms. Huscandis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for contributing to the confusion around this. I guess we've gone around and we know what the merits are and we know what people's concerns are. I think the only thing I would add after hearing members' comments, and maybe this ties into the thing that we haven't talked about yet, that we're not supposed to be talking about the potential of maybe asking voters what they think, is that it is slightly impossible when we know what our other options are, not to have those in our mind when making decisions. And the other option that I suspect we will deal with next, a seasonal sales tax. We have received correspondence from members of the community who are not a fan of that one, and I suspect will work to kill it. And so I only bring that up not to get too far afield, but I think it's germane to why you might consider keeping this in the conversation, is if you're down to 2 and your other option is one that members of the community are going to try to campaign against, you might want to keep this one in the conversation if you want to remove sales tax on food.
Let's vote on this now, unless there's more discussion on the substance of property tax to fill the gap. Ms. Spiegel,
Madam Chair,
Mr. Smith.
I'm sorry, what is the actual question that we're being asked?
This is to move forward with the property tax proposal or never talk about it again. Leave it as an option, or you hate it and you never want to talk about it again.
Nothing tied to action on the 13th or in the.
No, I don't think anything we do in this committee can bind us to anything on the 13th anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Glashewski.
if this is to leave the option on the table or this option for the advisory vote, I'm struggling with what we're voting on here. We could have another conversation about advisory vote and put this or not put it in, but to talk, I'm just, again, what exactly are we doing here? It's a separate thing, the advisory vote. We could put anything in the advisory vote.
I'm trying to narrow down as a finance committee which options we're talking about so that we don't have to have the conversation from scratch every time the issue comes up, that we can move forward and narrow down our options and get closer to a choice.
Okay, okay.
Ms. Wall.
Madam Chair, one more clarifying on the motion. A yes vote would keep this in the conversation for a conversation about advisory. A no vote would mean we would never talk about it again as an assembly. Is that correct?
Correct. In this committee, as long as I chair it. Everybody's yes. No vote would be we all leave, right? Big that. Ms. Spiegel.
Thank you, Chair Treem. To move for discussion, the concept of paying for removing sales tax on food by increasing the mill rate by 1 mil. Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hale,
Yes.
Assemblymember Wall,
Yes.
Assemblymember Gladysevsky,
Talking about advisory vote? Yes.
Mayor Weldon,
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Wachal Gadak,
Yes.
Assemblymember Smith,
Yes.
Chair Treem.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 ayes, no nays.
Okay, let's take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break. We're back. Ms. Gladys.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. I would move. Which one is it? Ordinance 2217, the seasonal sales. Is that correct, Mr. Palmer? The seasonal sales tax one. To the assembly. We haven't, and I'll speak to that. We haven't had a lot of input on these proposals. And at least getting it to the assembly would give people an opportunity to comment on whether it's a good idea. And I appreciate the complications on the ballot in the fall. And you could argue that we should do this next year after the 1%'s there. This is the path we were on some time ago when we had, it's one of those meetings long time ago when we kind of whittled some options down. So I would speak in favor of this, putting it on the ballot, and see if voters are interested in taking sales tax off food in exchange for a seasonal sales tax rate. I've spoken to the reasons already about it is not only collected from residents. So that's what I would move.
Thank you, Ms. Gladys. Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. I would object for a couple of reasons. Number one, I have a business, as everybody knows, and I think this would be a difficult to collect, as opposed to why I voted for the year-round increase. So that's my main reason. And then my other main reason is I don't think we should have a question on sales tax when we're trying to get the 1%.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur with the mayor. As a business owner myself, I strongly believe that a 6% seasonal sales tax will have very negative consequences for large swaths of locally owned businesses that only cater to local Junoites. While I'd like to think of better ways to extrapolate more funds from the tourists, the best way to do that is to allow for more businesses to open up. We'll literally get more money from the tourism industry rather than trying to squeeze an extra 1% on sales tax out of the people that live here year round. It's almost like punishing Junoites for living here during the summer. So I would actually not even, I'm so opposed to this, I would not even support this on an advisory vote. Thank you for the time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Any further discussion on this motion? Just gonna, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm torn here. We had discussed, and this had kind of been, as Ms. Gladys had said, this has kind of been the pathway for a little bit. We've heard pushback from some groups, and I just haven't heard specifics, I guess, showing that people couldn't implement this. It's a concern, and it might be totally true, and that information just might be out there, or I've totally missed it. But I like the proposal. I proposed it initially. That being said, after hearing more about the property tax, the idea of a property tax increase, and probably the progressivity of that, getting more money into the hands of those who will spend it in town, because that is what people with lower incomes do. It gives me a little pause to put this out. It's unfortunate, I think, but I'm not totally sure what I'm going to do here. And if I support it now, it doesn't necessarily mean I'd support it when we would adopt it at the June 13th assembly meeting. And if I'm wrong on that date, or that we would be formally adopting it there, someone correct me, but not totally sure what to do here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will support this motion. I really appreciate those who have reached out to us about this one. I definitely think there are some pros that we've heard about. There's some cons we've heard about. you know, I think of all the options, it's, you know, the best of, you know, some complicated options for lots of the reasons we talked about. It comes closest to meeting our goals in a way that I think is going to be popular. And I think that, you know, for me, this does go in front of the voters. And so we might think this is the best path to replace the revenue for exempting food, but the voters ultimately are going to get to decide. And so I'm supportive of putting this in front of them as an option.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a pop quiz question for everybody. Which company takes 3% of Juno's economy every year? Visa. Thank you, Ms. Hughes-Scandies. And so when we increase sales tax, Visa gets 3% of every single one of those sales tax dollars that gets put onto a charge card. And I'm speaking from somebody with a business that when I began 20 years ago, I had less than 5% of my sales were in credit cards. Now 95% of my sales are in credit cards. Visa is having a field day right now, along with American Express and MasterCard. And if we implement a strategy that increases sales tax to make up for the sales tax that we're trying to remove, one of the unintended consequences is Visa will still get to take 3% of that. If we pay for that with property tax, that's just a straight up tax that I believe is even deductible in certain tax situations. So by putting it on a property tax, there are benefits to the individual family. And then we saw in the math, if we say that if we make the difference up in property tax, there was a bigger benefit to the individual families. I wanted everyone to be aware that if we correct this on sales tax, that Visa will continue to get 3% of that increase that we create there. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Gladys-Shevsky.
Just to clarify, this at this point is just to get it to the assembly. And so there's still weeks, a couple, however it is, to decide how you'd really vote, just FYI. And also to hear from people. Like I said, we've only heard from a small number of people. Anyway, that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Gladys-Shevsky. What is the schedule? Have these two ordinances, they've been introduced already, haven't they? Mr. Palmer.
Yes, Madam Chair, they have been introduced. They are set for public hearing at the next meeting, which is
The 13th.
June 13th. So if the committee green lights them, that's where they'll be.
Okay, thank you. I see one more hand, Ms. Hughes-Scandies.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just briefly, I appreciate the desire to shift our tax burden onto our seasonal visitors. I like the way Skagway does it. I think with a longer term shift towards that, I appreciate why that's an attractive thing to do with our taxes. My concern with this and why I won't be supporting it is that I think it just creates too much confusion on a ballot when we're going to be talking about the 1% sales tax. So I'll be no.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes-Scandies. Mr. Smith, yes, no? No.
All I was going to say on that is I guess I'd give the voter more credit in their ability to just tease out multiple questions. I understand that as a concern. I think people could get it. Just wanted to say that out there.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Going once, going twice. Ms. Spiegel, will you please call our roll?
Thank you, Chair Traim. On the motion to move ordinance 2022-17 to the full assembly, Assembly Member Gladys-Shevsky.
Yes.
Mayor Weldon.
No.
Assembly Member Bryson.
No.
Assembly Member Wall.
Yes.
Assembly Member Smith.
Yes.
Assembly Member Hale.
No.
Assemblymember Wachlal Gadak,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
No.
Chair Trim.
No.
Motion fails, 4 ayes, 5 nays.
Okay. That takes us to our advisory vote issue that Ms. Wellman brought up earlier. Does the committee want to discuss that tonight? Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask a question if it's okay to talk about when we would have to make this decision by. I would love to not do that tonight if we don't have to.
Excellent question. Mr. Palmer. Do you know?
Oh, what was that?
Oh, do you have another question?
I don't know.
Chair Trine, we think we know the right answer to that question. We think the right answer to that question, based on the clerk's schedule for producing the ballot, is that an ordinance needs to pass final passage on the August 1st assembly meeting, which means that such an ordinance would need to be introduced on the July 11th regular assembly meeting. So July 11th introduction and an August 1st final passage, public hearing would be your only shot at doing that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
And I guess I should back up and say, it is not too late to introduce such an ordinance on the June 13th meeting. That's still an option
Okay,
too. So you could introduce it on the 13th, pass it on the 11th of July, introduce on the 11th of July, pass it on August 1st.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have one option that we were willing to forward to the assembly. I was then going to, as we've had this discussion, now that we're to the point of talking about the advisory vote, the advisory vote could look like, we want to remove sales tax. Our idea is to put 1% on property tax. That's a very simple question. Listening to Mr. Smith's comment about, we got to think about what are the voters going to think of what ballot we hand to them. And an advisory ballot that doesn't talk about sales tax, it says remove food tax and we'll pay for it by 1% or 1 mill rate. That removes it and it doesn't jeopardize the 1% temporary sales tax, because it's a very different question. I could support moving in that direction. I just wanted to, I like that, using where we've come in the mayor's idea. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Mr. Bryson's comments about it being clear to the voters. However, I also believe that an advisory vote is different enough than a, yes, I want to change a tax. Instead, we're asking them to advise us that does provide some clarity to the voters. This is just an advisory vote. I believe we do have an option to rescind either of our earlier votes if we wanted to, the 5.5% or the 5 and 6%, with a 6 vote in favor of rescinding that, so that puts those back on the table for this advisory vote suggestion. And I would actually move to rescind the 5.5% vote and put that back to a vote if that is appropriate.
Yeah, look, do we need to do that for this discussion? I don't think we need to rescind it because we didn't take it off the Ms. Gladszewski.
Yeah, I agree with you, Madam Chair. That the vote was to put it on the ballot or not put it on the ballot. It wasn't to never speak of it again, if you will. So it's not going on the ballot, but what's going on the advisory vote, if we have one, is up to us when we talk about it.
Okay, that's super.
That's what I think.
That's super. Can I speak to my support for the advisory vote, since we don't have to do that? So that came into this meeting worried about where we're going because there are so many complexities and it does feel rushed. We've just been through the budget process. We didn't have time to spend much time on this issue. And I agree, if not now, then when, but it does feel rushed and we just haven't been able to really think very hard about this. At the last finance committee meeting, I talked about having some kind of meaningful discussion about what we do with our fund balance. And I'd really like to look at what we've spent excess money on over many, many years. And we can take COVID out or not, and how we actually look at our fund balance in terms of managing risk. For example, the risk of removing sales tax on food items. So if we put it to an advisory vote this year, that does give us some time to have that conversation so that we can we can get a sense of what the voters think. It's important this topic is important to many of us on the assembly, but maybe it's not that important to our residents in Juno. And so it will give us that opportunity, but it will also give us the opportunity to have those conversations about the fund balance, and we'll have a sense about filling that bucket. We'll have a sense about where we're at with revenue estimation. Thank you. So I really like the idea of an advisory vote, and I really appreciate, Madam Mayor, you're bringing that forward.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess just a thought or a perspective would be, it would be helpful for me to, if we decide, one, do we want to talk about an advisory vote, and two, when do we want to do that? Because if we don't need, I don't know, are people, I'd prefer not to do it tonight. And if so, maybe we could just figure out those items and not have to talk about the benefits of an advisory vote without doing the work on it. Anyway, just a thought, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we hypothetically vote to move forward an advisory vote so that the process could be moving forward? And then if we got to the point where like, hey, we don't want to, like, we just don't pull the trigger on the final vote moment for the advisory vote.
I think we could make a motion to have ordinance drafted.
Madam Chair, I would move that we have an ordinance drafted for an advisory vote on this ballot with the advisory questions to follow at a future finance meeting. Did I do that right?
I think you're going to need to be a little more specific about the advisory questions.
Oh, we have to have the advisory questions set before we can set the. You're supposed to shake your head.
Ms. Gladchevsky, then
I would move to amend Mr. Bryson's motion and just have him include the advisory vote to have all three things included. And then we can delete them if we don't want them. And then they're all there and we could pick from the three. So the property tax mill, the 6 and 5, and the 5.5 year round. And so they're all there and then easier to delete than to add.
Mayor Weldon.
So just to be clear on Ms. Gladchevsky's motion, we'd end up with 3 different advisory votes.
Yep.
And then we can choose which ones go for it. Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Just
Okay.
making that clear.
Thank you, Madam.
So that would
Thank you,
be
Madam Mayor.
three ordinances that would each get a yes or no. We wouldn't have to amend anything. Okay, great. Okay, yeah. Any objection to the motion as amended? No, that motion passes. Great, we're done. Yay. We sent this to ourselves, so I think we should just do it. Our final agenda topic is agenda topic D, repeal of sales tax exemption for sales of goods by nonprofit organizations. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Chair Treem. There's nothing in your packet other than the ordinance, the draft ordinance, which is on page 100, page 100 and 101 of the packet. The only thing that I would point out about this is that the way that this is drafted by Mr. Palmer, which I think attempts to reflect the substance of your conversation, only repeals the exemption for the sale of goods by nonprofits, not services. And part of the reason I point that out is because nonprofits generally sell services, interestingly enough. They sell experiences, they sell membership benefits, they sell whatever. For the most part, when the sales tax office reviews what's a good and what's a service, I think at the end of the day, most nonprofits will principally be sellers of services, not goods. So what nonprofits that sell goods, obviously, any storefront kind of retail operated under a nonprofit framework would then be subject to tax. And similarly, fundraisers by nonprofits that sell fundraisers that are goods rather than services will be subject to tax. There has always been a question, I think, that lingered for many people about Girl Scout cookies and other sort of consumable fundraisable items. That problem is solved, obviated, if sales tax is removed from food. However, if sales tax is not removed from food, there is no solution to that problem. We will start telling nonprofits that if they sell goods, that we will require them to collect and remit sales tax on those goods based on the repeal of the nonprofit exemption for the sale of goods. So I hope I've not confused anything. I'm just trying to be specific about what the ordinance in front of you does and does not do.
Ms. Gladstevsky and then Mr. Bryson.
So Mr. Rogers, I thought that things like Girl Scout cookies and lemonade stands were covered under the exemption casual and isolated sales. It says casual and isolated sales means retail sales that are not pursuant to a business license. Anyway, blah, 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 goes on. I thought that that covered those tiny things.
So
What does that cover if it doesn't cover that?
It mostly, so Assemblymember Gladys Chair Treem, it mostly covers garage sales, truthfully. There is nothing casual or isolated about Girl Scout cookie sales. In fact, it is
Individual.
one of the largest sales of anything that happens in the community all year in terms of visibility. So we have never interpreted the casual and isolated sales to include something that is that magnitude or organization.
Follow up. I called Mr. Palmer today about this very thing and he referred me to this section. So, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Ms. Gladstevsky. I think the question is a little bit split here. So maybe the question for Mr. Rogers is the actual individual girl selling versus the Girl Scout, entity that's selling. And that may be a different question.
Well, anyway, I would like it so that Girl Scouts could sell cookies. If you could write something like that.
Thank you, Ms. Gladstevsky. I'm with you on that one. I have Bilal Gadak and then Mr. Bryson.
Yeah, just wanted to provide a little bit, it's not a conflict, but a disclosure. As we're considering this, Sea Alaska Heritage Institute is, of course, a nonprofit, and I sit on the board of directors for Sea Alaska Corporation. Just wanted to disclose before we dive too much deeper that they are separate entities. I do not sit on the board of trustees for Sea Alaska Heritage Institute. And so just to avoid any confusion about the two, that they are separate.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Bryson and then Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If a group did a fundraiser and they sold Krispy Kreme donuts one weekend, we would consider, like the boys basketball team brought in Krispy Kreme donuts and then sold Krispy Kreme donuts over a weekend, we would consider that an isolated sale, correct?
Assemblymember Bryson, we make those determinations as we see the facts of them, but I think the facts based on what you've described, I would not describe that as a casual or isolated sale.
You would consider that to be something that would require to submit sales tax if they brought in Krispy Kreme. So could we have on this for nonprofits, but then have a category for youth fundraising is not taxable? We can't apply common sense into this to solve this correctly.
There is one like that already.
Mayor Weldon.
I'm the one that is for this tremendously, and I keep bringing it up, but I can see that the body is not ready to deal with this tonight. And after hearing Mr. Rogers, there's probably some amendments we'll have to do. So I would vote to table this for this evening and bring it up at the next finance.
Okay.
I would
Ms.
just ask that these small things be somehow addressed as many as possible. Cause again, there is a thing about retail services at a school approved activity at school groups, fundraising for its approved purpose goes on, blah, blah. So that's another place to add a sentence to. If I think people are trying to exempt those from the exemption.
Chair Trima, I think the thing that's important to remember, coming back to comments I've made in several meetings, many sales that happen out there qualify under more than one exemption, right? And we are going to have lots of nonprofits try to qualify under the healthcare exemption or some other exemption. So it is possible for all these things that we're talking about that upon looking at the code, we'll find that there is another exemption. I'm just cautioning you that we apply casual and isolated sales pretty narrowly to meaning not a business transaction, a transaction between Jeff and Carol to sell an old couch. I mean, that's how we generally apply the casual and isolated sale.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers. I think we'll need confirmation that young children selling us food will be exempt. I have Walal Gadak and then Mr. Bryson.
Yeah, thanks. It sounds like I missed a lot of conversation previously. And apologies if this is what you just addressed, Mr. Rogers. But, you know, in terms of medical exemptions, are we talking also then, so any medication, you know, that is picked up, this would not be considered under this, it would be exempted. Is that correct?
Assemblymember Wahal Gadak, the costs for medical and healthcare are broadly exempt and will remain broadly exempt.
Okay, Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now that we've tabled this, I don't want to beleaguer this, but the codes that Madam Deputy Mayor is looking at, if that's CBJ code, then that's absolutely something that's within our purview that we can put a line of code in that says we're not taxing children's fundraising sales. So I'd like to make a motion to have no, I won't do that today.
That was included. That was, yeah, that was included in Ms. Gladys motion. So I don't think there's any objection to Mayor Weldon's motion to bring this back to the Finance Committee. I don't think there's anything else we need to talk about tonight. We are adjourned.